we especially want to thank the administration. You really fought for us, unusually so. From the time you took office, I know that you've been engaged, and Secretary of State Pompeo also was very engaged and fought for us, and Vice President Pence, we're very grateful, Mr. Bolton. There are a number of people in the Senate, and I can't mention everyone, but I know that my Senator Tillis visited me in prison. So did Senator Shaheen and Senator Graham, and Senator Lankford has been involved from the very beginning. So we're so grateful to so many people in Congress who stood with us and who prayed for us and who fought for us. So we want to thank you all very much.
That was Pastor Andrew Brunson at the White House on Saturday, expressing gratitude for the Trump administration and members of Congress for his safe return to the U.S. after 2 years of being held prisoner in Turkey. Joining us now are two senators who were part of a long-standing bipartisan push to get Turkey to release the pastor, Republican James Lankford of Oklahoma and Democrat Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire. And I thank you both for being on the show this morning. I guess, Senator Lankford, I'll start with you. Tell us about the process of how this finally was able to happen.
Yeah, exceptionally long process. It goes all the way back to October of 2016 when Pastor Brunson was swept up in the coup and was picked up without any charges, was held without charges for 18 months. I was there in December of 2016 meeting with the judiciary and the justice minister there in Turkey in Ankara, trying to be able to plead for his arrest, and at that time just to be able to pick up what charges they were with. This has been multiple hearings. There's been a lot of bipartisan push. This has been sanctions, a constant pressure on Turkey, which is a NATO ally, to be able to act like a NATO ally. And finally it comes down to last week when Turkey read all the charges, recommended 10 years of prison for Pastor Brunson, and then returned time served and kicked him out of the country. We're glad to be able to have him back.
Jeanne Shaheen, tell us your experiences with this.
Well, as James said, this is a very exciting development. I am so thrilled for Pastor Brunson and his family. His wife, Noreen, his whole family, his children were such great advocates for him, making sure that no one forgot that he was being held falsely in prison in Turkey. And it was, as you've said, a wonderful, cooperative, bipartisan effort across state agencies, with the Department of State, with the White House, with even, I think, the Defense Department was engaged, and so many senators working to try and secure his release. That's the way government should function. When an American citizen is held overseas wrongly, everyone should know that we're going to do everything possible to get them out.
So what was it a transaction? Was anything given in return, Senator Lankford?
No, not that we can tell there was anything given in return. Now, Turkey has asked for billions in dollars in sanctions relief. They've asked for Fethullah Gulen, who is a Turkish citizen who has rights to live here in the United States, who obviously President Erdogan is furious with and believes him for the coup, though he's not been able to provide any evidence of that. They've asked for his return. Literally, President Erdogan came up and said, "We will give you your pastor if you'll turn over Gulen. We're not going to have some sort of swap like that, nor give billions in dollars in sanctions relief for areas where they violated sanctions in the past." So they pushed for that for now 2 years. That didn't happen. We've continued to be able to add additional sanctions and emphasis on them to say, we expect you to act like a NATO ally. You don't hold an American hostage and ask for some sort of trade for favors. We'll talk about other issues, but not while you're holding an American hostage.
John Heilman.
Senator Shaheen, it's John Heilman here. I'm curious, I want to talk about Jamal Khashoggi's murder or apparent murder. Tell us what you think. First of all, talk about this. Obviously, the Turks have obviously an important role here in bringing this to light. Tell us what you Tell us what you think about the role they played and where you think this story goes from here, particularly in light of the president's comments last night on 60 Minutes.
Well, before I address that, I just want to point out that Turkey is still holding some other Americans, a former NASA scientist, and some State Department employees that they are also falsely imprisoning. And so I hope that the release of Pastor Brunson is a premonition of more to come from the Turks, that they will release the other Americans and the other people they are holding hostage. So I think Turkey has an important role to play. You know, one of the good news pieces of this is that hopefully this will allow us, once they release the American citizens they're holding, will allow our relationship to get back on a better footing, because they are in a very important geopolitical position where they lie between Europe and Asia. They are a NATO ally. We need to have a good relationship with Turkey, and so I hope that they will begin to act more like a democracy and less like a dictatorship, and will address some of the issues that have been outstanding. And one of the places where they could be very helpful is with what happened to Mr. Khashoggi. And what we have heard is that they're interested in working with the United States and going into the embassy and trying to help find out what happened there. Now, that hasn't happened yet, and it's my understanding that the Saudis have refused to give access to the embassy. But finding out what happened is very important, because we need to, as all of you said earlier, Saudi Arabia has not been acting within international norms, and we need to send a clear message about that.
Senator Lankford, I want to follow up with you and just ask you this question. You know, President Trump yesterday, in his interview with the interview that was broadcast yesterday with Leslie Stahl, seemed to suggest, well, you know, obviously it's bad if it's true that Saudi Arabia did this. There's not very many people that that we've heard from out in the world that don't think that Saudi Arabia is responsible. But the president says it's bad if they did this. We'll find out if they did it. But hey, you know, we got to keep this in the perspective. There's a lot of arms sales that we're making to the Saudis, and we got to see this all through the proper lens, which for him seems to be commerce. So I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. It seems like to some people, at least on this set earlier today, like the president is putting commercial interests ahead of the normal U.S. role in terms of trying to set a moral example for the world.
Yeah, it is exceptionally important that the United States sets a moral example for the rest of the world. These values that we have of the free exercise of religion, the free press, free speech, these are basic things that are in our values that we don't believe are just American values. We believe that these are held by every single person, that these are inalienable rights of every person in the entire world. And so as we present these values, we're also presenting to people the opportunity to be able to have this sense of hope in their own country, that one day they could have a free press, they could have free speech, they could have freedom of religion. Those are basic things that we want to continue to be able to push out there. So I would say on that, there are a lot of levers. The president seems to have pushed back pretty hard on the lever that some people are pushing onto him to say cut off all military aid, and that's the one solution. That's not the one option. And what I've really heard the president say, whether it was at the White House on Saturday or since then, is that I don't want to just say there's only one thing that we could do to push back. But one caveat that I want to put on this, we don't know about his status at this point. So it always makes me concerned to continue to be able to press out that he's been murdered, he's been dismembered, all these things that I hear of it. His fiancée is still waiting. I'd like to know what's going to happen before we press on what the next step is.
Well, Senator, if you find out, if the reports out of Turkey are true, and we find out that he has been murdered, that there was a plot, if stopping military sales is not the only option, what option would you prefer?
I'm not saying what that option would be at this point, Joe. Same thing that I've said before. Let's find out what has happened to him, and then let's find out then what we would do to respond to it. While I do think that we need to have a whole series of sanctions and everything ready to go for this, we've got to be able to find out, and at this point, not assume that he has been murdered until that we know that. Obviously, it doesn't look good. He walked into an embassy. There's no footage of him walking out. So we need to get this resolved first. And I do hope, as Senator Shaheen had mentioned, that the Saudis will open up their embassy for a good inspection of the embassy to be able to find out where is he and what happened to him.
All right, to Senators James Lankford and Jeanne Shaheen, thank you both for being on the show this morning. And the president has just tweeted.